We're just fundamentally incompatible. We're just not compatible. Very painful words to hear from your avoidant partner, well, now your avoidant ex, when they discard you. They pulled the rug from under your feet, blindsided you, and now they're giving you this vague, nonsensical answer that somehow you're incompatible. And it doesn't even make any sense because you had a wonderful relationship. Things were going so well. You felt like you got it right this time. You met your twin flame. There was a connection and a chemistry out of this world. Perhaps you even just had a wonderful trip together. You traveled the world. You went on holiday and things felt close. They felt wonderful. You had met their family and they met yours. Or perhaps you're even talking about marriage or even engaged. And suddenly you're fundamentally incompatible and it just blows your mind. Well, reality is you are fundamentally incompatible with this person, but not for the reason they claim. The reason the avoidant, who is likely a dismissive avoidant or fearful avoidant who leans dismissive, the reason they're claiming this is because their fears have been triggered and they don't want to look within. They don't want to reflect on their fears and why they feel the urge to run and sabotage a loving, healthy relationship. So they look for external things to blame their fears on. Any perceived faults or differences between them and their partner can be used as a scapegoat. Oh, look, I like my coffee black, they like it with cream. I love Italian food, but they don't. I prefer thrillers when it comes to movies, but they prefer dramas. Tiny little things that really aren't a big deal, but they can turn them into fundamental incompatibilities. Because once they find this fault, this incompatibility, they no longer have to look within and ask themselves why they feel the urge to run from a loving partner. It helps them avoid. And when they do this, it's because their fears have been triggered. They have a very specific set of fears, and these fears are triggered by healthy relationship behaviors. And it all goes back to childhood. This is a person that received consistent emotional neglect as a child, often growing up in a stable home where their food, clothing, and shelter needs were met, but their emotional needs were not met. Homes where you don't talk about feelings. They were not given that love and nurturing that they needed as a child. In addition to that, their feelings were rejected. If they expressed themselves, especially a negative emotion, it was shot down. They also often had parents or caretakers that had very high expectations on them, and they struggled to meet those expectations. And the only time they got any kind of affection from their parents was when they met or exceeded those expectations. The end result is a person that fears being close because they learned that if you rely on anybody for your emotional needs, such as your parents or caretakers, you're going to get rejected, disappointed, perhaps even abandoned. They've also learned to associate communication about their feelings with rejection and abandonment because that's what happened to them as a child. And any kind of expectations in the relationship feels insurmountable to them because they couldn't meet the expectations of their parents. They feel it's inevitable that they will fail to meet the expectations of their partner, no matter how trivial those expectations actually are. So, healthy relationship behaviors will trigger these fears because healthy behaviors lead to emotional closeness. It leads to vulnerability, which is an important part of a healthy, loving, sustainable relationship. But for an avoidant, it's terrifying because that means their partner's getting through those walls they have up. And the conscious or even subconscious fear that the avoidant has is if I let down my walls, this person is going to figure out that I'm defective, unlovable, and they're going to reject and abandon me. That's why they have these walls up. That feeling of defectiveness that the avoidant has is because they didn't receive the love as a kid. They personalized it and grew up to believe that there's something fundamentally wrong with them. It's a core wound of shame. And shame is a toxic emotion. It's not like guilt. Guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I am something wrong. Now, also in the adult relationship, when there's any kind of disagreement, even over something small, it feels insurmountable to the avoidant because they are not able to communicate, not willing to because they associate it with rejection and abandonment. So a difference in opinion is very scary. It feels hard. It doesn't feel easy to them. Expectations, another trigger. But these are all parts of a healthy relationship. Even just being consistent and loving to this person creates closeness, which causes them to feel unsafe. And the fact is, the relationship was going well. You were growing closer. There was a spark, there was a chemistry, and that is why they got triggered. But rather than reflect on this, rather than process the emotions and self-reflect, they look to blame it on you or something in the external. Because when they find a fault in you, when they find an incompatibility, they no longer have to look within, which means they get to avoid poking at that core shame wound, the defectiveness wound. It's very painful. They look to leave it alone and avoid it. But self-reflection, acknowledging their attachment wounds, acknowledging their fears, acknowledging wrongdoing, acknowledging that they hurt you, well, that would confirm their own inner defectiveness in their own mind. So they don't go there. That's why they avoid provoking that wound. They avoid that wound from being exposed to their partner. And emotions that come along with it are very painful, so they suppress those. They had to learn how to deal with this stuff on their own as a kid. They were never shown how to process emotions, deal with stress. They weren't shown how to build their self-esteem up. They weren't shown any of this stuff. So what they learned was to avoid, because that's all they figured out how to do. But that fundamental incompatibility is not what they claim it is. The real fundamental incompatibility is the fact that you want that deep, loving, emotional connection. You want that commitment. You want emotional intimacy, and they don't. They're not able or willing to do it. And that is the fundamental incompatibility, because you want that closeness and they run from it. And at the end of the day, that emotional intimacy is what you need, want, and crave. And it really is a crucial, critical part of a healthy, loving, sustainable relationship. So yes, they showed you there is a fundamental incompatibility. It's just not on the trivial scapegoat thing that they blamed it on. It's because the relationship was going well. And that's not your fault. If you were consistent, loving, emotionally available for them, and they still did this to you and said you're incompatible, what it really is their insecurities, their attachment wounds, and yeah, to a certain extent, their character. Don't beat yourself up. You wouldn't have done it to them. You didn't deserve it happening to you.